Hey guys, welcome back. This is the story about what if Naruto was a hollow. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well, it really means a lot. So let's start the what if. Even in the face of such danger, Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni remained a stern, steadfast spirit. He wasn't at his desk any longer, but was now standing directly on his balcony, overlooking the pure chaos ahead. He had not taken action. All he had done was give out orders to the captains of Soul Society. They would lead their divisions in a counterattack, but right now it didn't seem like it was working. He had already felt the Ryatsu of several of his captains disappear, and the Konoha Association was not back yet. Yamamoto's mind turned. The departure of the Konoha Association and the arrival of this hollow army seemed too grandiose to be coincidence. What were the odds that as soon as dozens of his best Shinigami go on leave, the largest force Soul Society has ever faced appears? Either those Shinigami from Konoha had another agenda, which seemed highly unlikely, or this was all staged from the beginning by the Hollow Force, who handpicked the exact moment they were gone to strike. If the latter was true, then how were stupid beasts such as Hollow able to coordinate such a plan? Yamamoto knew how. It meant someone in Soul Society was a traitor. His eyes were locked on a portion of Soul Society. A massive blue Zero had just been fired from an avenue in Serete far away from his position. It was clearly much more powerful than a normal Zero. Yamamoto banged his stick against the ground. This had gone on long enough. He needed to take action, for two particular reasons. 1. To rid Soul Society of the Ryoka. And 2. To scold his forces for daring to lose. He banged his staff against the ground again. What do you want? He could tell, of course, he could tell. The Ryatsu near him was as bloodthirsty as could possibly be. Someone, most likely an Arankar by the looks of things, had infiltrated his office. There was a crash, and a gust of wind. A limp body crashed into the railing directly next to Yamamoto, flopping to the ground in an unnatural position. Clearly a corpse. When Yamamoto took one look at the face of the corpse, he nearly snapped the wooden end of his staff clean in two. The neat silver hair and mustache, the pale eyes that looked even paler than normal now that they were glossed over. It was his vice-captain of 1,000 years, Sasakaibe Chajuru. He didn't shout or curse. In fact, he didn't say anything. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see a figure standing casually near the door to his office. At that distance, it was clear who had thrown Sasakaibe's body. He turned around slowly, taking in the appearance of the intruder. He was a short, blonde-haired Arankar, rather young-looking. If he were a denizen of his Soul Society, he would appear as little more than a child. Yet, Yamamoto knew better. Beneath that appearance was a true hollow, a beast that had spent dozens, if not hundreds of years devouring souls. He used his Bankai, but it wasn't anything impressive. The loathsome Arankar commented. He stood in front of me without any fear, but when I told him I knew about his Bankai he went nuts. And then he gasped for breath. I killed him. The second, no. The millisecond Naruto had said those things, Yamamoto's staff disintegrated into ash, the top half of his Shinigami robe burned away and he was left clutching a normal katana with a black hilt. Turn everything to ash, Ryujin Jaka. He wasted no time. Naruto was impressed. Flames consumed the entire balcony, and Naruto was already beginning to breathe slightly heavier due to the suffocating Ryatsu that engulfed the surrounding atmosphere. Deep within his old, blackened heart, he felt the sort of primal, animalistic fear that emerges when staring down an apex predator. And it exhilarated him. Naruto focused his Ryatsu, and released it all. Every single drop of Ryatsu within his system was put into the spiritual pressure he made, to the point of him forcing it out. Wow! Naruto said in a rare moment of awe. His full Ryatsu was a powerful orange tornado that would choke the life out of anything it touched, a tempest that would bore through anything. And yet, even it was not comparable to the power of Yamamoto's Zanpakuto. Naruto smiled. The old man would be so fun to kill. In the back of his mind, he could feel all the Ryatsu around Seirete. All the members of his Arrancar army, and all the Shinigami. The battle had almost ceased, and he knew the reason why. They could feel, no, they knew down to their very souls what was going on. They could see the inferno and tornado rise high above the First Division's battle, and it struck fear into all of their hearts. Naruto knew it, and so he struck. Out of all the Espada that were fighting in Seirete, Grimmjow was the one who was making the most out of the experience. While most of the Espada preferred to at least be subtle in the ways they killed, Grimmjow hopped from roof to roof, gutting Shinigami and generally causing havoc and destruction. It was safe to say that he was drawing the most attention. Yet, he hadn't met anyone who was even able to slow him down in the slightest. He even forgot what he was supposed to be doing. Grimmjow-sama. Grimmjow halted in his tracks, a look of abject irritation coming onto his face. The rest of the Espada had already sent their fraction off. As for him, he didn't have fraction anymore, yet this Arrancar was content on following him around. He had already told him to get lost. What? He turned around, as the young-looking Arrancar following him caught up, breathing heavily as fatigue overtook him. His brown hair was flattened by the headband-like mask on the top of his head. "Wait for me, Grimmjow-sama." Grimmjow growled. "Look, kid. I'm not your commanding Espada, so I don't get why you've been following me around all this time. But this is an invasion of Soul Society. You can't just follow me all day and do nothing here. Go off on your own and kill some Shinigami. If you don't, there's going to be hell to pay once this is over." The young Arrancar looked like Grimmjow had just kicked his puppy. "What's your name anyway, kid?" "Konohamaru." The Arrancar breathed out. "Stupid name, kid. That's the kind of name a Shinigami would have." But Grimmjow stopped himself when he felt the rising of a certain spiritual pressure. It felt familiar, like the kind he had fought before. He flashed away, not so gently grabbing Konohamaru and shoving him out of the way as a column of ice appeared directly where the two of them had been standing, freezing the tiles on the street and the surrounding buildings. Grimmjow appeared on a roof a safe distance from the ice, dropping Konohamaru to the ground with a heavy thud. The other Arrancar scrambled to the edge of the roof, his eyes quivering as he saw the damage the ice caused. "What was that? I've seen that before." Grimmjow growled. "Ice, and a lot of it." Judging by the captain-level Ryatsu he was feeling, and the fact that he had fought an ice-wielding captain before made it pretty obvious who he was dealing with here. He closed his eyes, feeling more Ryatsu signatures enter within the range of his pesquisa. They were all small fry, so they were probably just a platoon that was meant to accompany their captain in neutralizing the Arrancar threat. Grimmjow growled, and fired a Siro point-blank towards where he sensed the Ryatsu. It was at this point that Grimmjow knew that the average Shinigami was incredibly, unfathomably weak. The fact that his haphazard, errant Siro obliterated four Shinigami like that was proof of it. I mean, he didn't even look as he fired that thing, and it still killed a handful of them. "Wow, Grimmjow-sama. That was incredible!" Konohamaru exclaimed. Grimmjow grunted. That kid was still here, and he was still being as useless as ever. "If you're going to stand there and be impressed." Grimmjow began dangerously, "Then why don't you get out there and fight?" he finished in a near roar to Konohamaru. Konohamaru flinched at the tone from his superior, and a bead of sweat rolled down his temple. "Yes, sir." Grimmjow surveyed the scene in front of him. "Leave that white-haired kid to me. You can't handle him. But make sure to clean up the rest of the trash while I'm busy with him." Grimmjow ordered, to which Konohamaru saluted. With his subordinate in order, he turned to address the leader of the pack of Shinigami. The white-haired kid had changed a little bit over the past decade or so, but was still recognizable even to him. The only key differences were that he looked a little older since then, maybe a year or two. What Grimmjow was concerned about was how his strength had changed. If he was still the same, well, Grimmjow would just walk all over him. "You! I remember you. You're the stupid kid who somehow made it to captain rank. I fought you around a decade ago. Guess you're still alive and kickin'. What was your name again? Grimjow snapped his fingers along to his speech, trying to remember. The captain glared at him. It's the 10th Division Captain, Hitsugaya Tushiro. He said, annoyed. And I remember you as well. Grimjow Jigerjax, you were one of the premier Arrancar in Aizen Susuk's army, but you and the rest of the Arrancar disappeared a decade ago. I never thought you would appear now of all times. Well, what can I say? My boss likes to be thorough. Aizen is dead. We have confirmed it. This boss of yours is not Aizen. I know. Hitsugaya replied. Yeah, but it's not any of your business who the boss is, though. No way we'd follow some punk-ass Shinigami longer that we'd have to. That's why Aizen is dead. Hitsugaya continued to glare. But that's not important right now. What is important right now is this. Grimjow trailed off, before he pointed an accusatory finger at Hitsugaya. You better give me a good fight here, none of that bullshit from last time. So you better have gotten way stronger since then, or else I'm gonna mop the floor with ya. He felt the cold chill of Hitsugaya's Ryatsu. It was definitely heavier than it was last time, and it carried an air of much more experience and maturity that came along with age. By all means, Grimjow should have been intimidated, but he wasn't. Instead, he smiled a wide grin, characteristic of a battle seeker like him. Impressive, kid. This Ryatsu is way better than last time. It looks like we'll be able to have a much better fight. Still, there's no fucking way you're any match for me. Hitsugaya Taicho, one of Hitsugaya's subordinates, called out, as Grimjow released his own Ryatsu. Hitsugaya narrowed his eyes a little, but otherwise showed no indication that he was intimidated. Fall back. You'll only get in my way. This is clearly one of the lead Arrancars and an ex-Espada, and something only a captain can handle. You are all to split into two groups, and lend support wherever necessary while neutralizing the Arrancar threat. He ordered to his soldiers. Grimjow had his own set of orders, however. Kid! Don't let any of those weak fuckers leave. Slaughter them all, he barked to Konohamaru. You got it, Grimjow-sama. Konohamaru said cheerfully, as if he wasn't about to slaughter a bunch of Shinigami. His index finger flew to his waist, wrapping under a loop that formed as the hilt and guard of his zanpakuto. He hoisted it out with one finger, holding its point down. Shriek, chimpanzee. The Shinigami cringed as Konohamaru's Ryatsu spiked. In a whirl of green Ryatsu that almost looked like a torrent of leaves, his appearance changed. His body shifted and became beefy and ripped, while bony material appeared on his head, giving off the appearance of a war helmet. His teeth lengthened into brutal-looking fangs, while the same material covered his chest and shoulders. A long brown tail sprouted from his backside, whipping around in the wind. And finally, his posture hunched over as he began to knuckle walk, growling ever so slightly. The Shinigami seemed to be at a complete loss as to what to do, until Konohamaru gave off an ear-splitting shriek and began pounding his chest with his enormous fists. Grimjow actually looked slightly impressed. Well, I've got a hand to you, kid. You've at least got the fear part of being an Arrancar down. Meanwhile, it looked like Hitsugaya just realized that he was about to lose dozens of his own men. Stand your ground. Do not let that Arrancar intimidate you. Too late. With a fierce roar, Konohamaru moved at a speed that a big body like his shouldn't be allowed to move out. He broke right into the middle of the line of Shinigami, just as they had pulled their swords from their sheaths. Konohamaru's sword release seemed to be all about brute strength, and he showed it when he shot forth with a lightning-fast punch towards the nearest Shinigami. The enormous fist impacted the woman's head, which flew clean off her shoulders and rocketed 30 feet in the opposite direction. The other Shinigami gaped in alarm at his sheer power, and they fearfully backed up. Hey, you guys, Hitsugaya started, but he sensed movement from Grimjow, and brought his blade up to block it. Ice shot out from the contact between two swords, but Grimmjow was undeterred. "You don't have time to worry about your lackeys, kid. Just focus on me, or your reflexes will slow down and you'll get yourself killed," Grimmjow lectured. The two combatants backed up, and Grimmjow tossed his Zanpakuto back and forth between each hand. He rushed at Hitsugaya recklessly, sword extended. "Harinmaru!" Hitsugaya called out, summoning his already activated Shurikai. The dragon of ice wiggled its way onto the battlefield, opening its mouth and roaring. Grimmjow didn't pay it any mind. The ice dragon collided with the Aaron-car, bathing him in the frigid substance. Despite that, it only froze him solid for a couple of seconds, and by that time he had already broken free and was rushing at Hitsugaya once again. "What is this? Do you honestly think you can even slow me down with just your Shurikai? Stop being such a bitch and use your Bankai already," Grimmjow shouted, smashing his blade recklessly down on Hitsugaya, with no regard for defense. Physically, Grimmjow was far stronger than the young Hitsugaya, and the captain could tell that Grimmjow could almost snap his blade clean in half with the amount of force he was providing, and the little amount of resistance that he himself was giving. He heard more cries of agony from beside him, but he couldn't even think of faltering and glancing over his shoulder with the type of pressure he was under. "Just so you know, I happen to have regained my status as an espada. Septima espada, Grimmjow Jigerjax. I'm way different from last time, when I had just one arm and couldn't even release my Zanpakuto," Grimmjow cried. "Release!" Hitsugaya called out, not readily equipped to want to deal with an espada's sword release at the moment. Grimmjow held out his Zanpakuto, scraping his fingernails against the edge of the blade. Hitsugaya was prepared to stop the ritual by any means necessary. "I won't let you!" Hitsugaya shouted. "Bankai! Daiguren Hyarinmaru!" Ice materialized on Hitsugaya in the form of wings and talons, making him the visage of a miniature-looking dragon. The air around them chilled, and Grimmjow almost felt his skin freeze upon contact from the heavy Ryatsu. "Just kidding!" Grimmjow guffawed, stopping his pre-Zanpakuto release ritual as Hitsugaya flapped his icy wings and soared towards the Aaron-car. He sidestepped the thrust from Hitsugaya, as ice crashed forward towards where Hitsugaya stabbed. He held his sword with two hands, going in with his own thrust as he attempted to chip away at Hitsugaya's wing. The ice folded over itself, and Grimmjow's Zanpakuto only made a slight dent in the ice. Hitsugaya tried to sweep right through him with his sword, but Grimmjow was faster. He used Sonido to get away from the swipe, but Hitsugaya was hot on his tail with Shuinpa. The two engaged in a fast-paced sword battle in mid-air, both of them taking quick and agile jabs at each other. But as the fight went on, it became apparent to Grimmjow that he wasn't able to keep up with Hitsugaya like this. "Whoa!" Grimmjow cried out, as Hitsugaya swung his tail like a pike. Grimmjow knew already that this ice was strong enough to freeze him solid, unlike the ice that he was using with his Shurikai. Hitsugaya swung his tail once again, and Grimmjow backflipped over the captain, coming down to kneel upon the tiled ground. There were a few beads of sweat rolling down his face. That Septima whistled. "Those wings of yours are bigger than last time, and those ice flowers are gone too. I suppose you've worked on your fighting abilities. That timer for you Bankai doesn't exist anymore, meaning you can keep that Bankai out without a time limit." Hitsugaya floated onto the ground, a stoic look on his face. At that same moment, 3 Shinigami came flying over, almost bowling over the young-looking captain as they sailed between the two combatants. Their bodies were bruised and bloodied. Hitsugaya gasped. "What is going on here? Don't tell me you guys are having that much trouble with one Aaron-car," he cried out. The 3 Shinigami couldn't answer for 2 reasons. 1, they were gurgling up too much blood to be understandable. And 2, there was currently a large shadow underneath them, rapidly getting bigger. The Shinigami screamed as a big monkey Aaron-car fell on top of them, crushing them into paste and making a giant crater in the ground. Konohamaru shrieked and beat his chest, motivated over his victory. "Impressive, kid. You're not as big of a bitch as I thought," said Grimmjow to Konohamaru. Hitsugaya wasn't impressed however, but it was in that where Grimmjow saw the biggest opening. "You don't have time to focus on him," Grimmjow said, crashing his blade down on Hitsugaya's shoulder and chipping off a big portion of the ice. Hitsugaya had been trying to take out Konohamaru in the meantime before he could do any more damage, but clearly Grimmjow wasn't about to let that happen. "You shouldn't pick on the small fry, they don't really like that much." "Hey kid, let him have it," he shouted at Konohamaru. Konohamaru noticed that the captain was locked in combat with Grimmjow and currently occupied, so he took advantage of the situation. Like always, he used his physical power to try to flatten Hitsugaya. However, the young captain outstretched a wing that managed to hold up against Konohamaru's strength, while simultaneously parrying both Konohamaru and Grimmjow. Grimmjow managed to avoid the strike, but Konohamaru wasn't so lucky. Hitsugaya's bankai caught his left side, freezing his ribs and rendering him immobile. Grimmjow grit his teeth angrily, but otherwise didn't say anything. He realized that Konohamaru was near useless now though, so he wouldn't bother trying to get him in on the fight. At that moment, something happened which made Grimmjow realize that he needed to stop messing around. All of a sudden, it felt much harder to breathe. His lungs burned, like he had inhaled hot ash. That wasn't what was concerning him though. It was what happened just a second after that. A familiar crushing ryatsu that could be felt within the very atmosphere itself arose. It was like a tempest, and it was suffocating. And it was clashing with the heat, fighting it. With both of them together, it was almost maddening, even to an espada like him. He could even see it from his vantage point. How couldn't he? Everyone could see it. The scorching hellfire and the whirling tornado that rose high above Soul Society in the First Division's barracks. It was awe-inspiring, but it also was sending a message. Naruto was starting. He winced and grinned, looking over at Hitsugaya. He could tell that the captain was barely capable of keeping his bankai active within the current heat, but it wasn't the heat he wasn't concerned about. It was the strong, foreign ryatsu. What is this? One of these is without a doubt Yamamoto Satecho's ryatsu, but this other one? I don't know. He muttered to himself. Grimmjow raised his sword. Sorry, kid. The fact that we're feeling this means that my boss has started fighting with your boss. He's done fucking around, so we're gonna have to speed this up, okay? He trailed off. Right now, all I need is your key. Back in Huecomundo, Ichigo had joined up with the Konoha Association, and they had been traveling east for quite some time now. That's what Ichigo had said to do anyway. There was a glum atmosphere that pervaded throughout the group, particularly in the upper echelons of the association. The truth about Naruto still stung with all of them, and Ichigo didn't want to intrude. As they continued to move east, the party sans Ichigo and Orihime were surprised to see the sandy deserts of Huecomundo turn into grassy fields. The night sky still hung perpetually overhead, but this place actually looked remarkably like the human world or Rukongai. Ichigo kept stealing glances at Minato every once in a while. He hadn't said a word since they had left the palace. Few people have, but there was something about Minato that seemed far more contemplative. He's my son, you know. Minato said finally, after he noticed for the third time that Ichigo was staring at him. Ichigo felt like a rock had just dropped into his stomach. Your son? Who is? He asked, but he already knew the answer. Minato smiled at him like nothing was wrong, but Ichigo could tell immediately that everything was wrong. Naruto is. He croaked. Ichigo swallowed. That hollow. The person you've been searching for all this time, and the one you just found out did all those things? Minato nodded. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Don't apologize. In hindsight, we should have figured it out years ago. Why did we not find him, when we had all the tools of Soul Society at our disposal? Why did we not find him after decades and decades of searching? Minato barked out a humorless laugh. Now it all makes sense, he finished. Minato-san. Let's just keep moving, he said, changing the subject. We need to move east quickly, and find him. He is our responsibility, and we will personally put a stop to his madness. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He heard Kushina pipe up from behind in the crowd a little. A realization dawned on Ichigo. She was Minato's wife, and had been for as long as he knew, so that meant that she must have been Naruto's mother. It's not just that, we all knew him too. Ichigo turned around, to see Inuzuka Kiba walking glumly alongside his group of friends. The normally spirited Shinigami was looking as glum as everyone else. Me, Hinata, Shikamaru, Ino, Niji. We all knew him when we were alive, we were friends. Some of us grew up together at the Ninja Academy when we were just kids. He loved Konoha. The idea that Naruto would become a hollow and eventually destroy the village he once loved is hard to stomach. Kiba, don't talk about him right now, Niji said sternly. Kiba read the situation. Hinata was sniffling, and the overall atmosphere of the group became even worse. Fortunately, something came along to distract the group for a while. A small gopher-like hollow emerged from the ground, looked around before spotting the Shinigami, yelped in alarm, and attempted to burrow back underground. Minato turned to Jiraiya, who nodded to his student. Quick as a flash, he snatched up the gopher hollow from the ground, holding it aloft as it squirmed. Its little strength was useless though, and it hung limply in Jiraiya's arm, awaiting its fate. Hold it right there. The gopher hollow turned around cautiously, to see Jiraiya leering at him in a comical, exaggerated angry face. The gopher hollow gaped underneath its mask. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind. Ichem. Like I got anything to say to a bunch of bitch-ass Shinigami. Go screw yourself, the loud-mouthed gopher exclaimed, suddenly overcome by a dose of bravery. Jiraiya grinned evilly, before bringing down his knuckles on the poor hollow's head. He noogied him roughly for a moment or two, the gopher hollow giving horrible shrieks and cries before it finally gave in. All right. What do you want from me? The gopher whined, rubbing its mask for a couple seconds. At that point, Jiraiya turned all serious. We're looking for a hollow by the name of Vulpes C. In these parts, you'd probably recognize him by the name Naruto. Do you know anything about him? Jiraiya asked. The gopher's masked face took on an expression of absolute terror, much more than Jiraiya was capable of doing with a simple noogie. The main members of the Konoha Association huddled around him. Naruto, the gopher hollow squeaked. Looks like we've got a keeper. Jiraiya sighed, allowing the little hollow to continue. Yeah. I know him all right. Hard not to around these parts, with the things he's accomplished. And I know I'm not supposed to be helping Shinigami and whatnot, but as far as I'm concerned, there's no enemies when it comes to deal with that creature. Just stay away from him. For your own sakes. That was not the answer that anyone in the Konoha Association had been expecting. What we do with ourselves is none of your business, Hollow. Just tell me, where can we find him? Jiraiya asked coldly. The gopher hollow's eyes became glossy and apathetic. If you insist, I'll tell you where to find him. Continue heading east until about 40 miles from the ocean. You should come across a great canyon, larger than anything you would see in Soul Society. That is Naruto's encampment. He should be there. Ocean? Jiraiya inquired. Since when was there an ocean with Hueco Nevertheless, as they traveled farther into it, it was apparent that there were plants there, but they would save the inquiries over the landscape of Hueco later. For now, they needed to move. Jiraiya threw away the gopher hollow none too gently, and it landed dazed in the dirt as the company moved on. They passed through fields of tall grass and light forests, and it was Minato who saw the large, scraping canyon that stretched across the landscape like a landmark. There it is, Minato said, with an air of finality. We're here, Kushina added. And somewhere down there, we'll find Naruto. She finished, tears welling into her eyes. Minato nodded at his wife. Let's put an end to this. Wait, Kushina. Everyone, look over there. Minato said, as his eyes were drawn to what sat on the right edge of the canyon. The Konoha Association swiveled their heads over to the right, perplexed at what they were seeing. It's sort of like a village, maybe? No, that wasn't right. The correct word for it would probably be outpost, but nonetheless it was still more advanced than anything they had seen in Huecomundo, save Las Noches of course. A village? Hinata echoed. There were a few dozen tents set up along the outpost, as well as a massive long hall in the center. She did notice a few hollow moving around the outpost, and they weren't normal hollows either. They were mostly ajuchas. Ajuchas, and a lot of them, remarked Jiraiya. Maybe we should check out that outpost first. That sounds like a sound plan. But I will go alone on this one. We need information, and I think it's about time to employ some of my old ninja skills. The rest of you bunker down here and wait for me to return. He said to his friends. They would be sure to relay that information to the rest of the group. With the Konoha Association hunkered down, Minato crept closer to the village. When he was a good enough distance to actually comprehend what was going on, he realized that this group was up to something. What are they up to? He snuck up into the village when there were no hollows in the immediate vicinity, sliding his back against the long hall behind a few barrels that concealed him. He peered inside the window. There were a few regular hollows sitting at the big table talking to a Vasto Lorde. Disregarding the extremely high-level hollow, this should hold some information. The invasion. Minato heard one of the hollows say, as a little snippet of the conversation going on in there. Invasion? The second wave of attack is to begin shortly. We have to be prepared. Once Serete has been cleaned up by the Espada, we will be brought into the main event and the battle with the Royal Guard. Minato's eyes widened. Second wave? Invasion? Serete? Did this mean that Soul Society was under attack right now while the Konoha Association twiddled their thumbs in Huecomundo? There was no way this was a coincidence. Serete was rarely ever invaded, let alone by an attack force of hollows. How would occur at the same exact time that the Konoha Association was in Huecomundo, and the two forces would miss each other? Someone had set them up. I need to let the others know about this immediately, he whispered to himself. Hey, why don't you stop sneaking around and come inside? We don't bite much. Minato's breath hitched in his throat at the voice that came from right beside him. He hadn't even sensed any Ryatsu spike, but how could he have been snuck up on so easily? He tilted his head over to the side. It was the hollow from inside. The Vasto Lorde that was apparently getting briefed. As quietly as he could, he rose to his feet, gripping his Zanpakuto as he glared at the Vasto Lorde. It didn't even flinch, and just remained there with a bored expression on its mask. Who are you? What was that conversation about? He demanded. The hollow, which was a gray humanoid with 6 spikes encircling his shoulders, spoke. My name is Valakav. I suppose you can call me the reserve general in the Arankar army. I'm in charge of holding down the home front while the Espada are away. And you should not be here. That doesn't answer my question with regards to that conversation. What are you planning? Minato demanded yet again. He was shouting now, and a multitude of Hollow and Arankar were crowding around the two of them, hissing at the Shinigami menacingly. Valakav simply waved an arm, and they all backed off and fell silent. The old Vasto Lorde regarded him with a strange look, but there was no hostility behind that gaze. Unfortunately, at this point there is nothing we can do. I know who you are, and I know that you are vital to this operation. Naruto wants you alive after all. Minato perked up at this. Naruto? I knew it. He is here. Where is he? Minato shouted. Valakav sighed. You don't get it, do you? He said lightly. Your son's a monster, Namikaze Minato. There's no getting around that, and right now he's currently making a crater the size of Iceland out of the Serete. And here you are wandering around the Huecamundo like a chicken with its head cut off. This wasn't supposed to happen, and now I'm going to have to find a way to fix it. He paused. I told you that you were vital to this operation. Naruto wants you alive, which means that no one here can kill you. And that's why I'm telling you all his information. Without it, you'd still be lurking around Huecamundo in the dark while the operation continues without you. You need to go back to Serete. Minato obviously didn't take this news very well. He's what? I'll make it a little simpler right now. Your son is the Primera Espada, and the leader of the most powerful fighting force that exists within Huecamundo. Right now, he is leading an attack on your soul society, and by all intents and purposes, he should have succeeded by now. And one more thing. He trailed off. He despises you. Naruto banged his Zanpakuto against Yamamoto's flame-wreathed one with all the force he could muster, his Ryatsu oozing out of his pores at full velocity. And yet, he was still almost incinerated instantly. Yamamoto's Shurikai was one of the most powerful things he had ever faced, and it had been a long time before something had exhilarated him this much. He cackled as a blast of flame pushed him back, searing his flesh. He emerged from the flames with nothing more than a few light burn marks, but it was more than anyone had managed to do in years. Amazing! I've never felt anything like this before, not even when I was fighting Aizen. Naruto shrieked. The old Shinigami simply kept his stony gaze on Naruto, never saying a word. Swordsmanship alone will clearly not cut it on a Zanpakuto as strong as yours. I suppose it's time to kick it up a notch. He guffawed, grinning excitedly as his eyes flashed with madness. He held his Zanpakuto aloft with his left hand, while he placed his right hand on the face of the blade. Yamamoto watched him stoically, as Naruto began to charge up an orange Siro in his right hand. However, this Siro was slightly different. As soon as it formed in Naruto's hand, it seemed to take on a liquid-like shape, and to top it all off, it looked like it was being absorbed into Naruto's Zanpakuto. Siro Corazon, he shouted, as his sword began to glow the same orange as one of his Siros. He swung it, and a wave of orange energy was released from the blade in a trail. Wherever it cut, it created Siros. My second of 3 unique Siros. And that's not all. Naruto tossed the Siro-charged sword to his right hand, and stuck his left hand out. It glowed with orange Ryatsu, but he wasn't forming a Siro. He was manipulating Yamamoto's Ryatsu. Extintor. He pulled his hand, and the flames wreathing Yamamoto moved to create a large opening in the circle of fire. Naruto took the chance. Still controlling the Ryatsu to a limited extent, he leaped through the opening and into the blaze, his Zanpakuto at the ready. Choke! He slammed his Zanpakuto down on Yamamoto, a wave of orange Siro emerging from where the blade swung. Yamamoto brought his own fire up to shield himself against the Siro, but he was forced to skid back to avoid the physical aspect of the blade. The Arankar was using a double-layered attack, but it was one that Yamamoto could handle. What was really grinding on Yamamoto's mind was the Arankar's ability to seize a limited amount of control from his flames. Your flames are strong and laden with Ryatsu. I can't manipulate them fully, but I have plenty of other tricks up my sleeve. Naruto shouted. He was still manipulating Yamamoto's Ryatsu. The old captain had still not said anything. He poured his Ryatsu into a finger. Reo Bala. The beam of light traveled straight through the flames, but it was meant as little more than a distraction. Yamamoto didn't flinch even as Naruto appeared in his blind spot, the flames parting to let him through via his powers. It was obvious what his intention was. The old Shinigami shunpoed away from the strike from Naruto, sprouting a geyser of fire where he anticipated Naruto would be 1 second later. Naruto yelped as he flashed out of the way from the pillar of great fire, charging up a new technique. He didn't get the chance though, as 4 more pillars sprung up around me, limiting his movements lest he accidentally spring another one. He managed to slice through one using his high Ryatsu and Ryatsu manipulation abilities, but more continued to spring up. Right now, he knew that fighting Yamamoto would be difficult. At this point, he didn't know who would win even if the both of them would all out from the start. Fortunately, all Naruto had to do was stall him. And what better way to do that than with a little taunting? Bala del Artista. His final form of Bala did not charge up any energy in his hands. Rather, 7 blips of orange light appeared in the middle of the air, before stretching down towards the ground like spears. All together, they formed a cage. What do you think? Looks familiar, don't it? He taunted. Naruto was manipulating his ballast to make them look like a replica of Sasuke's Bankai, and when that happened, something within Yamamoto snapped. Such disrespect. It must be mortifying for you, Sasuke, to see your beloved and prized Bankai be used as an imitation by a lowly Arrancar. I feel like I should apologize to you for allowing this to happen. Yamamoto finally spoke. Naruto grinned over at him, satisfied over finally provoking a response out of the old captain, even if it wasn't exactly directed at him. Yamamoto's face was even stonier though. Naruto didn't know what he was up to until Bankai, he said stoically, and the assortment of flames disappeared immediately. The life had been completely sucked out of the atmosphere. And Yukitake and Kiraku both knew it. Do you believe this, Kiraku? Yukitake asked, from his perch above. He was currently locked in sword combat with Stark, who finally seemed to realize that he needed to fight. Yukitake almost seemed to forget about Stark for a moment. You can feel that, right? This sense of dryness, the temperature has risen. Yukitake commented. Down below, Kiraku's Shirkai was not having much luck with Haribel, who still hadn't released. Of course, I can feel it, he said, no smile on his face. It's unbelievable. Genryusai-sensei's Bankai. I expected him to take to the front line, but I never expected him to use his Bankai right now. Yukitake commented. Don't be surprised. We have yet to make any ground against these two espadas, and they are not even the top ranked within their group. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they have a true monster at the top. Is that right? Kiraku smiled lightly as he addressed Haribel. I have nothing to say to that. Yeah, I figured. But if Yamaji is using his Bankai, it means we can't afford to stand here and take our time with our battles. I'm sorry, but we will have to defeat you immediately, Kiraku said casually. That won't be necessary, a new voice commanded. The two older captains turned around at the source of the new voice, as a new Arrancar appeared in the middle of the 8th Division square. Ulquiorra, Haribel muttered. If you're here, you have not taken any action throughout the invasion. What have you been doing all this time? Yes. I have been going around the Soul Society secretly during the chaos, fulfilling the mission that we were given. I came to inform the two of you that the preparations are nearly complete. I have collected 11 of the 13 master keys while the captains have been busy. Naruto has additionally gained the final 2, meaning that we have now acquired the full 13. We are ready to begin phase 2 of the operation. But as you may have guessed. He paused for a moment, feeling the hot air on his skin. Naruto has taken action. There is one last obstacle to take care of before we proceed. In addition, Sale and Barragan have been lost, but we need all the remaining Espada to rendezvous where Naruto is right now. Finish up your fights quickly. Stark's expression changed, before he sighed. We can do that. Wait. The 13 keys. Your army has been collecting them the whole time. How did you figure out the secret to those keys? Yukitake shouted at Ulquiorra. Ulquiorra glared slightly up at him. That is not for you to know. And this phase 2, it can't be anything good if you're collecting those keys. But what I don't understand is what you're doing to get to that point. Kiraku said, joining the conversation. Ulquiorra narrowed his eyes at him, but otherwise remained expressionless. It's simple. It means that Yamamoto Genryusai is about to die. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.